Good afternoon and welcome to Natural Resources. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Considine. Present. DeLong.
Present.
Gurr.
Here.
Hanson. Here. Jackson. Karas. Here. Kasama. Here. LaRue Hatch. Here. Marzola. Present. Watts.
Present.
Chair Anderson.
And I am present, and I realize that this time of session is when we've got people coming in and out for bill hearings, so just be aware of that. As a matter of fact, it looks like I might be losing somebody pretty soon. Please just remember to silence electronic devices while in the committee room. We've got a packed agenda. I think we're just going to start off and just jump right in with what all we're going to be doing today. We've got some work sessions and then some bills. So let's start off with the work session. If, as a reminder, it's not customary for the committee to take testimony or rehear these bills during a work session. However, I may ask the bill sponsor or witness to make clarifications or answer questions during our consideration of a measure. We'll start with Senate Bill 10. Will our committee policy analysis please go ahead?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Becky Pratt, Legislative Council Bureau for the record. As a reminder, as nonpartisan legislative staff, I can neither support nor oppose any of the measures that come before this committee. Senate Bill 10 is sponsored by the Senate Committee on Natural Resources on behalf of the Legislative Committee for the review and oversight of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and the Marlette Lake Water System. The bill requires the state land registrar to submit a certain report annually instead of quarterly and repeals a requirement for the state forest or fire warden to submit a certain report. There are no amendments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to do pass Senate Bill 10.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you so much. I have a motion from Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, a second from Assemblymember Watts. Are there any discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. I will ask, is there anybody that wants it? Thank you so much, Assemblymember Kasama, for taking it on the floor statement. Thank you. Next, let's move on to Senate Bill 19.
Senate Bill 19 is sponsored by the Senate Committee on Natural Resources on behalf of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Natural Resources. The bill ratifies the Great Plains Wildland Fire Protection Compact and the Northwest Fire Protection Agreement. There are no amendments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any discussion on this information? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Assemblymember LaRue Hatch, a second from, I believe it was Assemblymember Watts, as well as, and a third from Assemblymember Karas. Are there any discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously, and I will assign the work session, the floor session to Vice Chair LaRue Hatch.
Chair.
Let's move on to Senate Bill 21.
Senate Bill 21 is sponsored by the Senate Committee on Natural Resources on behalf of the Division of Outdoor Recreation. The bill expands authorized uses for grants awarded from the Outdoor Education and Recreation Grant Program. There are no amendments.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to do pass Senate Bill 21.
So moved.
Second.
The motion comes from Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, second from Assemblymember Karas. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion's passed unanimously. I will assign that floor statement to Assemblymember Jackson. And let's go on. I think this is our last one.
Senate Bill 43 is sponsored by the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services on behalf of the Division of Environmental Protection. The bill revises provisions governing a district board of health acting as a solid waste management authority or administering and enforcing provisions governing public water systems. There is an amendment to this bill which creates a definition for the term private club for purposes of exclusion from the definition of public swimming pool in Chapter 444 of NRS. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I have got a motion from Assemblymember, Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, a second from Assemblymember DeLong. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously, and I will take on that floor statement. Great, thank you so much for those of you that were staying, just to make sure that we were able to get through the work studies. All right, so let's now move on to our bill hearings. I will now open up the bill hearing on Senate Bill 324, which establishes prohibitions relating to the sale of water in certain disposable plastic bottles in communities abutting, the Lake Tahoe watershed. Thank you to our presenters for joining us today. I recognize that Senator Scheibel is in the room, but I think she's just here to say hello, as her intern will actually be the individual presenting it today. You may begin whenever you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Soraya Bonner, Soraiabohner, and I am Senator Scheibel's intern for this session. Today I will be presenting SB 324, which prohibits the sale of certain water bottles in the communities surrounding the Lake Tahoe Basin. I am also joined today by Noah Banayan from the League to Save Lake Tahoe. Senate Bill 324 prohibits the sale, offer for sale, or distribution for sale of water in disposable plastic bottles with a capacity of 4 liters or less in any community that borders Lake Tahoe. This includes grocery stores, convenience stores, and vending machines, or any setting where bottled water is sold to the public. This bill applies only to single-use plastic bottles, as defined in the legislation, and does not affect reusable containers or the sale of water in other forms, such as aluminum cans or glass bottles. The amendment to this bill would simplify the language, making clear that the Lake Tahoe region is the only affected area of this bill, not the entire watershed, which would include other bodies of water in northern Nevada, like Pyramid Lake. This amendment would also make the enforcement of fines optional, removing some of the weight of the enforcement from local municipalities. Lastly, this amendment clarifies that in emergencies, for the sake of public safety or welfare, plastic bottles may be sold in the Lake Tahoe Basin. The purpose of this legislation is to reduce plastic waste in the Lake Tahoe Basin. Single-use plastic water bottles are a common sight, often found discarded on Tahoe's trails, beaches, and roadsides. While many communities in the region have made progress in encouraging reusable containers through voluntary measures, this bill formalizes a restriction on one of the most visible and persistent contributors to plastic pollution around the lake. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Anderson, Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, and committee members. Let me make this, okay, there we go. My name is Noah Banayan, that's Banayan, and I serve as the Government Affairs Manager at the League to Save Lake Tahoe, often referred to by our mission, Keep Tahoe Blue. Thank you for the opportunity to present on Senator Scheibel's bill, SB 324, which, as you just heard, would limit the sale of single-use plastic water bottles only at Lake Tahoe, bringing the basin together to protect the lake from this common plastic pollution. The League was founded in 1957 to address the impacts from development and visitation that were causing our lake's famed clarity to decline. We are the oldest and largest environmental organization at the lake. As part of our campaign to combat pollution at Lake Tahoe, we organize and host beach and community cleanups throughout the year to prevent litter and other pollutants from reaching Lake Tahoe. These cleanups, along with proactive policies to limit the availability of pollutants near the lake and partnerships with local businesses, keep our beaches, trails, and parks clean and free of litter for locals and visitors to enjoy now and in the future. We've been hosting and organizing litter cleanups for nearly 15 years. During 2023 and 2024, Keep Tahoe Blue volunteers conducted 417 cleanups on the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe. Over those 2 years and 400 plus cleanups, volunteers removed more than 2,000 plastic bottles plus another 4,000 plastic bottle caps. Put together, plastic bottles and bottle caps accounted for more litter items than plastic food wrappers or more than all metal cans, pull tabs, and bottle caps combined. Based on our plastic findings during beach cleanups alone, it's clear that we need to do something to limit the number of plastic bottles and particles making their way into the lake, our beaches, and other popular outdoor recreation sites. This bill offers a critical step in the right direction by limiting the sale of single-use plastic water bottles in the immediate vicinity of Lake Tahoe. Specifically, SB 324 would allow the state to limit the sale of single-use plastic water bottles within the Lake Tahoe region, which includes Lake Tahoe and the adjacent parts of Douglas and Washoe counties and Carson City lying within the Tahoe Basin in the state of Nevada, as delineated on the official maps of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agencies, compact, and as defined in NRS. County health departments may enforce this policy by imposing administrative warnings and fines for a violation. We know this policy can work for a few reasons. There are ample alternatives for providing drinking water. Tahoe tap water is world-renowned and award-winning for its quality and taste. Additionally, Nevada businesses will still be able to sell canned and boxed water under this bill. Plastic alternatives are readily available everywhere businesses currently source plastic water bottles, such as aluminum, canned water, and boxed water. We know that this policy works because it's already required right over the border in the city of South Lake Tahoe. The city of South Lake Tahoe adopted an ordinance in 2022 to include a ban on single-use plastic water bottles of less than a gallon from being sold within city limits. The policy was fully implemented on Earth Day, April 22nd of 2024. This past summer, the League to Save Lake Tahoe conducted an audit of local businesses to assess compliance and any obstacles to it, and our audit showed almost 90% of businesses in compliance with the ban, which we presented to City Council and other bodies. A number of businesses on the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe are already taking proactive measures to reduce their plastic waste stream because they know that a healthy blue lake is better for business in the long term. Because when we have litter, this is what it looks like, and that's not fun for anyone enjoying Lake Tahoe. And this is specifically at Zephyr Shoals after the 4th of July in 2023. And obviously plastic water bottles are not the only item in here, but 8,500 pounds of trash were collected on the 5th of July. And then the year after, a few months after the plastic water bottle ban went into effect in the city of South Lake Tahoe, we see headlines like this for the 5th of July in 2024. A few businesses in Nevada, well actually a number of businesses in Nevada that are already taking proactive measures such as Alibi Ale Works in Incline Village, the new Tahoe Blue Event Center and Edgewood Resort in State Line, and Heavenly Mountain Resort spaces in Nevada, to name a few, are leading the charge by choosing to not sell single-use plastic water bottles and instead supply aluminum, cardboard options, in addition to refill stations for personal bottles. I look forward to answering any questions you might have about this bill and its potential implementation in Lake Tahoe, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. So just want to make sure that I've got this right, that you have put in for an amendment, and that is changing on line 11 of our current bill from shall to may. Is that correct?
Noah Bunahan for the record, and yes, that is correct.
And so just to also verify, then would that also take away all of those violation amounts? Or is that still something that, even though we do have the word may in there, is that still the goal, is to continue to have the amounts as you've listed on the current language?
Noah Bunahan for the record, and I believe that is correct, yes.
Just wanted to verify that, so thank you so much. All right, are there any questions? Well, no questions? I do have one before, just making sure that nobody else has them. Does the ban that happened in the California side, does that through state law or is that through city ordinance?
Noah Bunahan for the record. The ban that's currently in place is specific to the city of South Lake Tahoe. That went through city council. There are statewide efforts underway because of a law passed in 2024 in the state of California, but those regulations are being written.
All right, just last time. Knew somebody would have it. Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Chair. I want to follow up on the question the Chair asked about the fines. I'm looking at the amendment that's on Nellis, and it's just striking the word may, but it doesn't actually specifically talk about the text that has the fines. So the fines are still in the law, is that correct?
Noah Bunahan for the record, and yes, as I understand it.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair LaRue Hatch.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for bringing this. Tahoe is a treasure, I think, for our community, and I appreciate your efforts to preserve it. My question is, in the ban that's already implemented, how many businesses have actually been fined? I know you said there was a 90% compliance, so how has that operated in practice?
Noah Bunahan for the record, thank you for the question. No businesses in the city of South Lake Tahoe have been fined for any violations. And when we conducted our audits and our continued surveys of businesses that do sell or did sell plastic water bottles, the minority that weren't in compliance were selling through backstop, which we were totally fine with. There were some language barrier issues that we were able to work through as well. And otherwise, yeah, no fines have been issued as a result of this. Businesses have been willing and compliant in it.
Assemblymember Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. And I appreciate you coming to visit with me, and we could have a discussion, and I think I half kiddingly but kind of seriously said, really, we should just say if you litter at Lake Tahoe or anywhere, but Lake Tahoe, you just lose your Lake Tahoe card, like goodbye, don't come back. But because you're more pragmatic than me, we have this bill before us. So as I've had some time to think about this, take a look at the amendment. I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around is we're trying to encourage not littering. And when we look at the picture, there's other types of litter, not just plastic bottles. The red cup, the potato chip bags, things like that. So I guess I'm wondering, we're starting with single-use water bottles, but we penalize a business, but we don't penalize that the business isn't littering, people are littering. So I'm curious what the rationale was to go after the businesses that sell lots of things and they're not responsible for where those products end up, rather than the actual people that are littering.
Noah Bunahan for the record, thank you for the question. There are a lot of considerations that went into that. I think we primarily wanted to take what we know works. And as a science-based organization, we saw the outcomes already and the positive outcomes from the City of South Lake Tahoe's ordinance that targeted businesses. And we wanted to take those results and make them applicable in other places around Lake Tahoe. But we as an organization, I think, are less likely to want to target individuals for their behavior, and we want to be able to provide things like recycling bins and additional amounts of those during peak visitation days. But we would love to, have a conversation with you about those alternative ways to tackle litter in the basin, because it is pervasive, and this is by no means going to stop litter, but it is going to stop one really common item. And again, based on the results that we've had in the city of South Lake Tahoe, we wanted to apply that same model elsewhere.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that. So when we think about, well, is the ordinance working, a local ordinance working that gave you some results? I don't know that we've made the direct correlation that it was the ordinance per se. It could have been. I know it's getting phenomenally hard to park, to go anymore around the 4th of July. And we tend to do that a lot in the summer, go to Tahoe. But I'm getting less and less that we go up there. So I'm just wondering, do we have a direct correlation that it was the ordinance? And was there like a big education campaign that rolled out before the ordinance went into place? And did that have a bearing, not necessarily banning the use of but people were just more aware, like, I'm going to be more conscientious in that.
Noah Bunahan for the record. And yes, there was a massive education campaign by my organization and many of our partners in the basin. The Drink Tahoe Tap is in itself a campaign, and we worked with a lot of local businesses to provide reusable water bottles with that logo on it, and I believe the Visitors Authority was handing those out for free for a while too. And if you could please remind me the other part of the question.
I think you answered it. I was saying, was there a big education plan ahead of time and trying to do the correlation thing?
Right.
We don't know if it was the education, we don't know if it was banning the single-use plastic, but just in my closing, I do appreciate these efforts. I think we all love the beauty of that beautiful lake, and we want to find ways. Shaming is always effective in my book. So,
But the
but,
question is over.
so again, thank you though for being here, and hopefully we can find some solutions.
Thank you, Assemblymember, for the commentary. We'll move on now to Assemblymember Karas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. You did very well, very good. My question's kind of simplistic because I'm from the southern part of the state. Can you please tell me the names of the communities that abut the Lake Tahoe watershed?
So the actual communities, Noah Bunayan for the record, along the shore. Yeah, so State Line, Incline Village, Glenbrook, and then apologies if I am missing any within that. There aren't that many because a large part of the shoreline of the lake is state land and state parks, so Sand Harbor being one of the most, I think the most visited in Lake Tahoe. And so a large part of the shoreline it doesn't actually include any retail.
A quick follow-up, Chair?
Quick, please.
Did I say question? I'm sorry. I don't know what I said. I apologize. My mic went off, sorry. What I was really trying to get at, because I didn't know, is it's really just the areas immediately surrounding the lake.
Noah Bunayan for the record, and yes, this would not affect Carson City.
Okay, and then a short comment, because I don't see any trash cans.
Thank you so much for the commentary as well as the clarification. But I do know that there has been some efforts to try to get more trash cans also on the beaches. All right, any more questions? Okay, seeing none, I think, unless Assemblymember Gurr's adjustment of his watch is not an attempt to get a question. Nope, it's just adjusting the watch. All right, so let's move on to testimony and support, if you will, please. If you are in support, please come on up to the table. We'll start off here in the Carson City area, and then we'll move to Las Vegas and Elko, which not sure if anybody's here in Elko. You may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, committee members. Devin Middlebrook for the record, Middlebrok. I come to you today representing myself as former city council member and mayor of the city of South Lake Tahoe. It was one of the greatest achievements of my term as mayor of the city to adopt the ordinance on the California side, banning the single-use plastic water bottles. As you heard from the presentation, it really has supported that Tahoe way of not drinking out of single-use plastic water bottles and enjoying our beautiful tap water. It also hasn't harmed the local businesses in the community of South Lake Tahoe. In fact, Target just opened a location in the city limits following the ban being in place, so they still came to the region knowing that they couldn't sell the single-use plastic water bottles. I went and checked out the store when it opened, and they have a full water section with cans and boxes and all of those alternatives so people can still buy water from Target and Target can still sell water. It has also provided economic development opportunities for local businesses. Alibi Ale Works, which was mentioned, now sells a canned Tahoe bubble water, which is available in all of the many of the retail stores around the lake. So really utilizing our assets and the Tahoe way. So again, something I was extremely proud of in my time as mayor of the city of South Lake Tahoe and would love to see it spread to other areas of the lake. Thank you for your time.
You.
Hello, Chair Anderson and members of the committee. My name is Tristan St. Dennis, and I am the Policy Associate for the Nevada Conservation League. As we have seen today, single-use plastic bottles are one of the most common items found littered across Lake Tahoe's beaches, trails, and parks. Plastic bottles can break down in the environment but do not biodegrade, leading to microplastic pollution in the lake and surrounding areas. By using alternatives for single-use bottles, we can keep plastic out of our water and ecosystems and work to protect the treasured areas around Lake Tahoe. We urge the committee to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in Carson City? Testimony and support? Seeing none. Elko? Las Vegas? AVH?
To testify in support for Senate Bill 324, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Again, if you wish to testify in support, please press *9. Chair, the public lines are open and working. We have no callers choosing to testify in support.
Thank you. We'll now move to opposition. If you'd like to testify in opposition, please come on up to the table. We'll start off here in Carson City, then we'll move to Las Vegas and Elko. You may begin when you are ready.
For the record, my name is Joelle Gutman Dodson, and I'm the Government Affairs Liaison with Northern Nevada Public Health. First of all, I wanted to thank the bill sponsor. And while we appreciate the environmental goals behind SB 324, we are here in opposition. We recognize that the most recent version of the bill no longer requires local health authorities to enforce the ban on water sales. However, we remain concerned about the unintended consequences of including permissive language that says health authorities may enforce. Permissive language can still create operational and political pressure. Given the very strong community interest in protecting Lake Tahoe, we fully expect local health departments to face expectations from environmental groups and residents to take on the enforcement, even when we are not the best suited agency to do so. Our core mission remains on public health priorities such as food safety, restaurant inspection, and the prevention of foodborne illnesses. Shifting attention to regulate bottled water sales, even voluntarily, would stretch limited resources and potentially distract from essential services. And while we've engaged with our local partners to explore solutions, and we appreciate the intent of the bill is commendable, we believe it places health departments, health districts, in difficult positions caught between community expectations and the reality of our scope and capacity. Thank you.
Lindsay Knox with McDonald Carano here representing Douglas County. While we truly appreciate the efforts that this bill wants to make, we believe, similar to Joelle, that the permissive language will be problematic in the basin. We look forward to continuing conversations with the proponents.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. For the record, I'm William Horn with Western Public Affairs, representing Republic Services. Unfortunately, we need to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 324. Republic Services is absolutely supportive of efforts to mitigate pollution and encourage recycling. In fact, Republic Services has an extremely long track record of supporting sustainability and recycling. Our opposition is only to the extent that Republic Services is concerned about the possibility of this policy to be implemented in Southern Nevada in the future, as there are efforts in California to expand this very policy as well. Republic Services operates a polymer center where they recycle plastic bottles for reuse. This center is the product of an $80 million investment. A policy such as this has the potential to have a negative effect to the Republic Services business model. It is for these reasons we respectfully oppose Senate Bill 324. Thank you.
Chair Anderson, David Thorpe of the American Beverage Association, THORP. I'm here representing the non-alcoholic beverage industry, which employs over 1,300 employees across the state. We're opposed to SB 324 retail ban on the sale of 100% recyclable PET bottled water. We agree plastic pollution is a problem. We are committed as an industry to be a part of the solution. Our innovative 100% recyclable plastic bottles are valuable containers that are made to be remade. They can be made into bottles They can be made into clothing and other materials. We are using, as an industry, less plastic in our bottles, and we're using more recycled plastic in our bottles. The beverage industry's plastic footprint has declined nearly 8% from 2018 to 2022. The amount of recycled plastic in our bottles has nearly tripled over those 4 years, and nearly 2 out of 3 bottles contain recycled plastic. This bottle is made from 100% recycled plastic. It's made from other bottles. On this bottle are 3 messages about recycling the bottle. There's 2 chasing arrow recycling symbols, and not just on our water bottles, but on all of our plastic bottles is a message to consumers: recycle bottle with cap on with the chasing arrow. So a lot of information for consumers to know to recycle this. From a business perspective, the ban will take away the convenience and affordability of a safe option to consume water, and will very likely hurt local businesses. Local grocery stores, restaurants, convenience stores rely on bottled water sales. Over the last couple of weeks, our industry has worked with our customers in the area, and we've heard from over a dozen local businesses who have expressed concerns about this ban. Their business information is included in my written testimony. This Friday, a Mexican restaurant owner will have a letter to the editor published sharing her concerns in the Tahoe Daily Tribune. So many residents and tourists will still buy bottled water. They'll just most likely go elsewhere to do their grocery shopping, denying sales to local stores. Alternatives that have been mentioned, I know you're going to cut me off.
Sure, yeah.
Alternatives such as aluminum bottles of water are 2 to 3 times more expensive. The cardboard water bottles are not recyclable, so for that, we're opposed.
Notice that you did, I believe you did provide some testimony earlier today, or you have done that, so thank you very much. Next.
Good afternoon, Chair Anderson and members of the committee. For the record, Donna Laffey with Ferrari Reader Public Affairs, here on behalf of the International Bottled Water Association. We're here today in opposition to Senate Bill 324, and we also have a full written letter on Nellis with our full testimony. To keep things short, we're going to echo most of the comments that the American Beverage Association made, and just note that this legislation would limit access and impact costs for a safe, healthy, and essential product. IBWA would urge the committee to consider those facts and the data that are within our letter, as well as the ones within ABA's letter. Thank you.
Anyone else here in Carson? Elko, Las Vegas. AVH.
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 324, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers for opposition at this time.
Thank you. We'll now move into neutral. Is there anybody here who would like to testify in neutral? We'll start off here in Carson City. But you know what, while you're getting a seat, anybody in Vegas? Elko. Why don't we start here?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Trevor Parrish with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber would like to thank the bill sponsor for working with us to mitigate our concerns on this bill. And through the adoption of amendment number 329, we have removed our opposition and we are now in neutral position. Thank you.
Thank you. AVH, is there anybody online?
To testify in neutral to Senate Bill 324, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers for neutral.
Thank you. Would you like to make any sort of remarks at the end? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, committee, for hearing this bill. Soraya is incredibly competent, and she is too nice to come up here and say what I want to tell all of you about our measures to negotiate this bill. And I want to be clear that Republic Services came to me today at about 3:40 to express their opposition. I would have been more than happy to work with them on this bill if they had come to me before today to talk about an amendment. I'm also happy to work with the counties on enforcement mechanisms. In fact, I literally told the health departments that I would accept any possible enforcement mechanism. I was open to whatever enforcement mechanism the counties, the health districts, the health departments, the state wanted to implement. And they brought back nothing except opposition. And so while I remain open to modifying this bill, to finding a path forward that works for everybody, it's impossible with partners who won't bring anything to the table. And so that's why I'm appreciative of the Resorts Association and the Vegas Chamber who did come to the table, and that's how we ended up with Amendment 329 on the Senate side. I'm even appreciative of the Beverage Association and the Water Bottle Association, who both came to me when this bill originally dropped, and we had conversations about the options moving forward, and we're simply on different sides of this issue, and that's completely fine. There's nothing wrong. Reasonable minds can disagree, and that's what we were doing in this situation. But I have always been open to stakeholders to discuss options to make sure that everybody can comply with the bill. I've never had a government agency come to me and say, we're opposed simply because we don't want to enforce this. And if, one agency says that it's not their job to enforce it, that we should put it on the agency whose job it is, I would be happy to do that if anybody could identify a different agency, but they haven't. So that's why I went to LCB Legal. And LCB Legal is the body that informed me that the health districts are responsible for enforcement of these types of codes and regulations. And that's why the health districts have been named here. And so I appreciate the committee's time and all of your attention to what I think is an important measure. And I will let Ms. Benayan also make her closing remarks.
Thank you, Senator Scheibel. Thank you, Chair and committee members. Noah Banayan, again, and final time for the record. I just want to point out as well that one of the partners we have locally in support of this legislation and who have submitted a letter of support is South Tahoe Refuse. And they service they're the recycling hauler from State Line to Glenbrook. And so they would be the ones losing on product in their recycling stream, and they were strongly in support of the City of South Lake Tahoe's ordinance and in this one as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and hopefully there'll be a way to have some people have a little bit more of a discussion. Thank you so much. Just keep us up to date with what's happening. All right, so I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 324 and open the hearing on Senate Bill 31, which revises provisions related to the adjudication of vested water rights. Thank you to our presenters for joining us today. And just so you know, Mr. Sullivan, it is not you. It is the time of the session when we have three individuals who all either are presenting a bill or have been called down because of work sessioning bills. So please do not take it personally. I'm sure that they really do want to be here for this bill. You may begin whenever you are ready.
Sure they do want to be here. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, and members of the committee. Adam Sullivan, State Engineer, Administrator of the Division of Water Resources, and we're here to present SB 31, which revises the provisions for adjudication of vested water rights. And with me is James Balatin, the Deputy Administrator for the division. And I'll provide some context, and then James will give more specifics about the need for the bill. So vested water rights are those that were established prior to the adoption of Nevada water law. And one of the fundamental duties of our office is to take in the information supporting those vested claims and review that and make determinations of the validity of those claims through an adjudication. Now, all the major water sources in Nevada have already been adjudicated, and there's a court decree that establishes those vested rights. But there's still a lot of unadjudicated sources or sources of water that may have claims of vested right, and we just don't have a record of it. And typically these are small springs in the mountains that might have stock water claims, or groundwater wells that were constructed prior to 1939. But having this uncertainty can create a workflow problem for us, because when we're trying to evaluate water right applications and their potential for impacting or conflicting with existing rights, if we don't know if there's vested claims or what those vested claims are, it slows us down in our review of new information, of new applications. Now, in 2017, the legislature adopted this deadline to submit claims of vested rights. And this is a really important date to keep. The deadline is at the end of 2027, so it was 10 years from the date that it was adopted. So the division needs to know what's claimed, again, to be able to protect it, for one. And these records need to be preserved and protected. We need to establish, this is 120 years ago when water law was established. So if there are vested claims out there, we need to preserve the history that documents their validity. The process to file a claim is really pretty simple. It's just a couple of page form that you fill out your name, the source of water, your description of the place of use and how much water and what you're using it for. It's not much to ask. And then once an adjudication of a specific area or source is initiated, then the division can request additional supplemental information if there is additional history that validates that claim. And we do the analysis and the review to determine the validity. We've been talking about this since 2017 and broadcasting this information to anyone who might be a potential claimant so that we can be sure that people know about this deadline. And generally there's been broad support around the state. So this bill, SB 31, addresses this special considerations that we need to make to bring the United States of America as a vested claimant into our state adjudication process. And James is going to go into more of the detail of why this is. But just to start with, so the current statute exempts federal reserved claims for water, and those are the water rights that are set aside from the public domain to support a specific use, such as tribal reservations, national parks, national monuments, things of that nature. But the current statute is silent on federal vested claims or vested rights. Federal reserved claims are really much more commonly what we deal with. There aren't very many federal vested rights, but there are some. And ever since 2017, the federal representatives have been approaching us about sort of making this point that our state law is missing this piece. And in 2022, we received a letter from the Department of Justice that went into some more specific requests to clarify this in our state law. So Senate Bill 31 does just this. It provides this narrow but important clarification that federal claims to vested water rights are not subject to that 2027 filing deadline. And this is needed just to prevent an inevitable lawsuit. And that's what's driving this bill from my perspective as an administrative agency. As a division, we just need to have a real clear path to be able to get our work done and clean up those loose ends. And now I'm going to turn it over to James, who can talk about more of the reason.
For the record, James Blatton, Deputy Administrator of the Division of Water Resources. SB 31 proposes minimal but necessary changes to NRS 533-087 and 533-095 that will ensure compliance with the federal government's limited waiver of sovereign immunity under what's known as the McCarran Amendment in water rights adjudications. Sovereign immunity is a legal doctrine standing for the proposition that a government cannot be sued without its consent. An adjudication of water rights is the state's legal process for determining the vested rights of parties on a water source. Vested water rights, as the state engineer mentioned, are claims to water that allege appropriation and beneficial use of water predating Nevada's adoption of water law in the early 1900s. Under the McCarran Amendment, the United States has waived its sovereign immunity for the purposes of the adjudication and administration of federal water rights under state law. The McCarran Amendment allows Western states like Nevada to force the United States federal government into the state adjudication process, including requiring them to be a party in our state courts. It ensures that these adjudications include all parties with interest on a given water source, including the United States of America. The change in Section 1 of this bill exempts the federal government from the deadline to file claims of vested right by the December 31st, 2027 deadline currently in statute. A deadline that, as the state engineer said before, serves a very important purpose. The changes do not, however, exempt the federal government from participation in the state adjudication process Rather, we see the change as necessary to ensure that Nevada can enforce the United States participation in these proceedings. In current law, all vested water rights claims must be filed with the state engineer by December 31st, 2027 to be considered in future adjudications. In the early 1990s, the state of Oregon had a similar statutory deadline for filing claims of undetermined vested rights that also attempted to apply the deadline to the United States, and the United States successfully sued to be exempt from that deadline. Specifically, in 1994, in the case of U.S. v. State of Oregon, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals held that the United States' limited waiver of sovereign immunity under the McCarran Amendment applied only once an adjudication was opened by a state. The Ninth Circuit held that this statewide deadline for claims was too far removed from the adjudication process to be characterized as a part of an adjudication, and therefore the claim deadline did not fall under the McCarran Amendment, and the United States had not waived its sovereign immunity to be subject to this deadline. The Ninth Circuit held that in the absence of the waiver of sovereign immunity, Oregon could not require the United States to register its water rights claims statewide by that deadline prior to the state and without actually initiating an adjudication of a given water source. Nor could Oregon prejudice such federal claims in an adjudication if the United States failed to file their claims by the deadline. If the state engineer were to enforce the statute as currently written and reject claims for vested rights filed by the United States after 2027, Ninth Circuit precedent indicates that Nevada would likely face a legal challenge by the United States and would likely lose on that issue. To avoid becoming likely ultimately being on the losing end of this type of litigation, the Division of Water Resources recommends the change in Section 1 exempting federal agencies from the claims filing deadline for any potential vested claims. This is the reason for this bill, not to give special treatment to the United States, but rather to address and comply with the special treatment that the United States already receives through sovereign immunity. Importantly, the statute as currently written already allows the United States to file reserved rights claims, as the state engineer mentioned, water rights that arise from federal action reserving land for a specific purpose, which includes a sufficient amount of available water for that purpose. The changes proposed in SB 31 simply allow the United States to also file its vested claims once the adjudication is initiated by a deadline then set by the state engineer to ensure compliance with the McCarran Amendment and to ensure that the United States can be joined in these state administrative proceedings and ultimately in state court proceedings that follow. Again, as I just stated, the change in Section 2 of SB 31 allows the federal agencies to file either type of claim, reserve right or vested right, after the 2027 filing deadline, once the state engineer begins a new adjudication. Making these changes resolves a vulnerability in Nevada state law that the United States has already successfully defeated once before in the Oregon case. By ensuring a proper waiver of the United States sovereign immunity, the state engineer can require the participation of the United States and its agencies in the adjudication process. This way, Nevada can ensure that state court decrees are complete and address all claims of vested and reserved rights within a given water system, including those claimed by the federal government. Nevada has many more water sources that have not been adjudicated, and those adjudications are likely to be initiated following the 2027 deadline. It is in the best interest of the public to only have to engage in the adjudication process one time on a given water source by bringing all the parties, including the United States government, before the state engineer and ultimately the state court. Therefore, the Division of Water Resources believes that SB 31 is a necessary change to ensure that these future adjudications are fully comprehensive and properly result in a waiver of the United States sovereign immunity. This is a simple fix to ensure that the statute complies with the law. I want to thank the committee for its time, and we're happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I know that there are many and that will see this as deceptively simple, but actually it has waves of other issues, I think. And before actually going into the questions, I do want to recognize Senator Gocochea, who is here today, because I believe he might have been one of the first people to bring forward language such as this and brought it up to our attention a number of years ago. Congratulations, Senator Gocochea, for being recognized for the Senate Hall of Fame, but happy that you're here today. So with that, I just want to make sure I've got something clear before I open it up for the rest of the committee. When you stated that if we do not, I just want to make sure I've got this correct. If we do not pass this bill, does this open us up to even more legal issues? If you could go into that a little bit deeper.
James Belaton, for the record. The division believes that is the case. The division has already been contacted, as the state engineer said, by the Department of Justice, more or less threatening to bring this up as an issue in the future if the statute, as it is written, seems like it applies to all vested claims, including the federal government. And if the state engineer were to deny those vested claims that came in after the 2027 deadline, I do think it would, it's not a hard thing to predict that the state of Nevada would face litigation from the federal government seeking to challenge that prejudicial treatment of their claims.
Thank you, and I know that I've got a few more people that will have questions, and so I'm going to start my list now. But I will start off with Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and Adam, thank you for sitting down and talking through the bill with me. I appreciated that. I think just a kind of simple question. If this bill failed this session, but was brought next session, which is before the December 31st, 2027 deadline, there wouldn't be any difference on how the feds would treat the situation because there wouldn't have been a ripe legal issue before the December 31st deadline. Is that correct?
James Blotton for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblymember DeLong. I think that's correct. I do think that I think the federal government was getting out ahead to do the legwork, knowing how the process takes, but I do agree that I don't think there would be a ripe legal issue until after 2027, because that's the only time that the statute that we're trying to amend would go into effect.
Quick follow-up. Thank you for that. So what I take away from that is we have some time to deal with this issue. We don't have to have it done by sine die this session to avoid the issue. So thank you very much.
Assemblymember Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody, for the presentation. Is there any way, we're trying to figure out the amount, the pot of water that can be, vested to each person. Is there any way to bring the federal government in to the table earlier to have them file the claims? I know we're saying we can't force them or unless you go through the adjudication process. Is there any other mechanism or way to bring them in to get all parties at the table sooner than later?
James Blotton for the record. The way the McCarran Amendment works is it's a very limited waiver of the federal government's sovereign immunity, and I don't think the way the case law and everything else works out that there's any way to achieve a waiver short of initiating an actual adjudication, and that was the problem with the Oregon case. They had this statewide deadline, just like Nevada, and the Ninth Circuit ruled that that statewide deadline is too disconnected from an actual adjudication to get the waiver to bring the federal government to the table.
Assemblymember Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. Maybe if we could just have a little primer on some of the terminology and maybe a real life example. So we talk about reserved and we talk about vested. So if you could maybe just, so we can have that clear, and then give us a scenario where this is working or isn't working, so we can have an actual example in our heads, if you don't mind.
Adam Sullivan for the record. So the federal reserved rights, an example would be a tribal reservation where you set aside that federal land and with it the water needed to meet the needs of that reservation are reserved. So that's that sort of example. It's a federal set aside. An example of a federal agency filing a vested claim. One example is at the Ruby Marshes, where the Fish and Wildlife Service acquired that land to establish a wildlife refuge. And as part of that, they acquired some ranch properties. So the federal agency could then file vested claims as successor in interest to that ranch, where water has been used continuously since prior to the adoption of water law. But now that would, if that hadn't already been filed by the ranch, the federal agency would then be able to file that vested claim in their own name.
Thank you so much, because I know it's not exactly something that everybody understands. And next up, Assemblymember Greer.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. Lots of questions, not gonna ask them all because I'm pretty sure that she won't give me that much time, or the chair won't give me that much time.
I'll give you 3.
All right, couple of things. You said that the major sources have already been adjudicated in the state of Nevada? The 256 water basins in Nevada, how many of them have been adjudicated?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, very few. When I say major sources, I'm talking about the surface water sources, all the rivers, and major perennial streams. There wasn't very much groundwater in use before 1939, so although we haven't adjudicated those sources, it's not anticipated to be add up to very much water.
And a follow-up?
Please.
How many vested water rights are owned by the U.S. government now? Aside from the marshes.
Adam Sullivan, for the record. I actually have some statistics in front of me that might help answer this question. There have been 1,838 vested claims filed by federal entities.
And they've submitted everything to comply with the 2027 filing date?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, that is correct. These are the vested claims that have already been filed. Now, I'll point out that most of these, almost all of them, are for stock water at spring sources. And recently, say in the last 20 years, when federal agencies have filed claims to those sources, they've filed reserved claims in association with say a national forest or something like that. So these 1,800, most of them date back several decades when it was more common to make that claim in the form of a vested right. But in the last 20 years or so, it's been almost exclusively reserved rights.
And then the last one.
I might give you another one out.
Okay. How many proofs have been filed since 2017, since the proofs of claims have been filed since the 2017 law went in by private individuals?
Before you answer that, I'm so sorry, Mr. Greer. Assemblymember Greer, maybe I'm getting older. I couldn't quite understand your question. Could you say it again?
How many proofs of claims have been submitted since the law went into effect in 2017?
Thank you so much. That helped me
Very
out a
welcome.
lot. Actually, I was really stalling for time, but whenever you're ready.
Adam Sullivan, for the record, there have been 1,872 vested claims filed since 2017, but that's for all claimants, not just federal entities.
Okay, that's what I was asking, private, not federal. Private claims.
All claims.
All claims are private, all of those are private claims?
No, all of those are for all claims that are filed, regardless of whether it's federal or private, or any claimant.
All right, so I'm not sure that I'm asking the question right or you're hearing me right. Private individuals with perceived vested water rights, how many have filed that claim to prove it up since the law went into effect in 2017? Where you have to submit proof of claim.
James Blunt, for the record, I don't think we have that specific number in front of us right now, Assembly Member, but as the state engineer stated, the 1,800 plus vested claims that have been filed since 2017, I do think the vast majority of those are by private parties, right? Because in the last 20 years, most of the federal claims have been a reserve right, not a vested claim.
Adam Sullivan, for the record, typically what happens is once we initiate an adjudication, that's when the federal agencies do the research and submit those claims to us, rather than voluntarily outside of an adjudication process. Yeah, for example, Diamond Valley was a recent adjudication that we've completed that was initiated after 2017, and we've completed that, and there were a number of federal reserved rights claimed in Diamond Valley.
There's still a bunch of questions, but I'll hold. I'll do the rest of them offline.
Thank you, sir, because I
Thank you.
think that
Thank
it's.
you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions, because I do think there was some clarification that was present there. But one thing that I want to make sure before I hand it over or allow the vice chair to ask a question as well, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly that with the exhibit that was uploaded for us, when it was the United States versus State of Oregon, in the absence of a waiver of sovereign immunity, the state may not require the United States or the tribe to register water rights claims prior to the adjudication of those claims, nor may it prejudice those claims if no registration statements are filed. Is there any way that you can put that into non-legal language for us?
James Blunt, for the record, I will try my best. Basically, the McCarran Amendment is one of the only, might be the only federal laws that allows the federal government to be brought into state court. And it specifically applies when a state initiates a comprehensive adjudication. And that is basically an administrative process to figure out all the different pre-statutory rights on a given water source. The Ninth Circuit basically held this deadline that just says, get all your claims in all over the state, regardless of the source, regardless of this, if there's an adjudication in by a certain deadline, is too far removed from that actual adjudication to get the waiver of sovereign immunity to be able to force the United States to the administrative table and then to state court afterwards.
To this non-attorney, that worked out perfectly. Thank you so much for explaining it to me in that fashion. Vice Chair LaRue Hatch.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for being here. It's always fun when we have just a maybe 5 or 6 word bill that has a room full of people. So my question is, there's just a little over 1,800 vested claims that have been filed by the federal government. Do we have any guesstimation for how many more have not been filed that would be subject to this deadline if we don't change this?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, we don't know until we initiate the adjudication. We just, it's too hard to answer that question.
Thank you so much, Chair, for the second. I, like my colleague, also have several questions. So 1,800 times they've been able to present these claims, they've been able to file them. We've walked through the process. It's very simple. It's a 1 or 2 page to file it. Why can't the federal government just file these couple of pages for the rest of the claims and avoid this whole issue?
James Watton, for the record. I don't think anything, Assemblymember LaRue Hatch, is preventing the federal government from doing that. Obviously, as the state engineer said, they've done it voluntarily before. It's just the Ninth Circuit precedent shows that if the deadline comes and goes, we will run into a legal issue if we try and say you missed the deadline, United States, the deadline passed, we're prejudicing your claims, we're denying your claims. It just creates a legal issue given the precedent we have, as Nevada is also part of the Ninth Circuit.
I know, this is a 3-question limit, I know. Okay, so I guess we're establishing that really the only way we can get a record of these is through adjudication. So what would it take to adjudicate all of these federal claims?
To initiate an adjudication that would cover all these federal claims would mean that we would have to initiate an adjudication for the entire state for all claimants. And as Assemblymember Gurr pointed out, we've adjudicated very few groundwater basins. The resources needed to accomplish that would be quite large. It's been done in a couple of other western states where they've embarked on a statewide adjudication, and they've hired dozens of staff, and it's taken still decades. And even in those states, it's still not complete. So it's a huge endeavor, but it's something as a state that would be an option. It's not something that I would initiate myself at this point because we don't have the resources to follow through on that. But as a larger state discussion, it's one of the alternatives that we could consider.
All right, I'll give everybody one more shot at the apple. I knew there would be somebody, and there's more than one. So, one question though, please, from each of you. Assemblymember Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, let's try going down this route. This is a sticky wicket. So a vested water right, at least as far as my understanding is, a water right is a separate property right. Like in real estate, I might have a home, but then if I have a water right, that's separate from the actual house, it's its own right. So private parties have to comply with this deadline by 2027, or else they lose their vested water right, if I've got that right. So I guess do we know, is the constitutionality of that deadline going to become a thing? Because if a vested water right is an actual property right, there's really not been any due process to take it away. Now, maybe that's a whole different thing, but I'm just questioning the 2027 deadline in general, and I don't have a lot of familiarity with it, but if you could maybe touch on that a bit.
James Bloughton for the record, thank you for the question. I don't think it's beyond the realm of imagination to think that once 2027 comes and goes, that someone will bring a challenge to the statute generally. However, SB 31 is made to address a legal question that's already been decided and that the precedent is already set, which is that these kind of statewide deadlines don't work with the federal government. As the state engineer said, I do think that the deadline serves an important purpose because we're talking about water rights that were established 120 plus years ago with evidence that's getting stale with every passing year. The deadline was passed in 2017. It's published every year per the statute. And it's an abandonment, basically by not filing a claim by 2027. I think the statute is intending to say that someone has intended to abandon it because they haven't taken the steps necessary with 10 years of notice. I don't know how that case would shake out, but I think that that's a fight that I think that's worth the state having compared to this fight that Oregon already had and lost with the United States.
Thank you. Assemblymember DeLong. Who's passing? Thank you. Assemblymember Gerd. Don't worry, you do not get his question too. You're also going to pass? Okay. Assemblymember LaRue Hatch. All right. It looks like it was not quite as bad as I thought it would be. But thank you very much for that, for all of your guys' work towards this. I have a feeling there might be a little bit of testimony. And then, so I hope though also you're able to come up afterwards as well, just in case there's some things we might have some other questions about after that. Thank you so much. Let's open it up now to testimony in support. If you're in support of this, if you would please come up to the table for SB 31. We'll start off here in Carson. You may begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alex Tanchik with Silver State Government Relations, representing the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe here in support. Thank you.
Anyone else here in Carson? Seeing none. Las Vegas, Elko, AVH in support.
To testify in support to Senate Bill 31, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon. I don't want to jump ahead of the queue. Am I okay to speak?
You may begin. Are you in support of this language? I think.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you to the chair
You may
of
begin.
the committee. My name is Oh, thank you, ma'am. My name is Captain Kyle Hoffmeister. I'm a judge advocate and regional environmental counsel for the Department of the Air Force. On behalf of the Air Force and Department of Defense, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss Senate Bill 31, which, as was explained, would exempt federal agencies from the requirement to file vested water right claims with the state engineer by 2027. Instead, federal agencies would be required to file their water rights claims when the state engineer orders a comprehensive water rights adjudication, which, as you know, has been the law for many years. The proposed amendments in Senate Bill 31 provides a necessary correction to Senate Bill 270. Senate Bill 270 established a process which, as applied to the United States, did not comply with the McCarran Amendment's limited waiver of sovereign immunity. Additionally, the revised language clarifies that vested claims owned by federal agencies will be filed at the same time as Federal Reserve water rights claims, which have vested pursuant to federal rather than state law, as opposed to two separate filings. In short, SB 31 is consistent with federal law. As you know, the DoD installations in Nevada play a critical role in our nation's defense, and water rights held by the United States are crucial to the DoD mission. These military installations are among the many federal land holdings which could be impacted absent the enactment of Senate Bill 31. Senate Bill 31 conforms Nevada Revised Statute 533.087 and 533.095 with the principle of federal sovereign immunity and is consistent with the McCarran Amendment. We do appreciate your recognition of the United States' limited waiver of sovereign immunity and as well as the important role the United States plays when it participates in water rights adjudications. Thank you to the chair and members of the committee for your time. Over.
And could you please possibly spell your last name, Captain Kyle? That's all I was able to get. Nope, I think he's already off.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, there you are.
My name is Cap. Can you still hear me okay, ma'am?
Barely, but let's try that again. If you could just
Okay.
spell your name, please.
Absolutely. Captain Kyle Hoffmeister, last name Hoff as in Foxtrot, M as in Mike, E-I, S as in Sierra, T as in Tango, E-R, Hoffmeister.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your testimony. Next caller.
Chair, we have no additional callers in support.
Thank you. We'll now move towards testimony in opposition. If you're here in Carson City, come on up to the table. And while you're making your way up, I'll just get Las Vegas out of the way and Elko out of the way since I don't think there's anybody there. You may begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Joe Guild, G-U-I-L-D. I'm an attorney in Reno, Nevada. I'm here on behalf of myself as a water right owner in Nevada, and I manage a ranch that has some 1880 water rights on the Carson River. Down in Gardnerville. So my concern here is that the integrity of one of the bedrocks of Western water law is being challenged. And I understand what the Division of Water Resources is trying to do, and I respect that. But this amendment, the McCarran Amendment that I'm talking about, is too important a discussion, if there is a challenge to it, to be determined in a 2-month legislative session. Frankly, these issues related to water rights last decades, and I think Mr. Blanton actually said that, and I agree with him, decades and more. So I have an interesting parallel that will illustrate that. If you will. Much has been said about the Oregon case decided by the Ninth Circuit, and what wasn't said, but the LCB Legal Division, at the request of Senator Scheibel, issued an opinion which basically supports the rationale and the holding in the Ninth Circuit case from Oregon. Both of these cases, both the case and the opinion, concluded the federal government cannot be subjected under the McCarran Amendment to state jurisdiction because in the deadline, there is no connection between, quote, filing claim information for the purposes of future and adjudications and the commencement of an adjudication, and that's the direct quote from the Ninth Circuit opinion. If this connection rationale for the commencement of an adjudication and the deadline for the government to file claims for vested rights, which they conclude is not a waiver of sovereign immunity, then all other claimants for vested rights following that logic should also not be subject to the deadline of December 31st, 2027.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Guild, you're actually a little bit over. So would you like to submit
Can I
the rest in
say
writing?
one sentence?
One sentence.
Therefore, next, the whole subject of the McCarran Amendment should be studied in the next interim in the context of a longer discussion of water law so we can sort this thing out because it does take decades. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Whoever would like to go next.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Doug Busselman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Nevada Farm Bureau. We are opposing SB 31 on the basis that we believe that the federal government is being granted unfair preference and don't believe that it's necessary for this bill to include the provisions that are being proposed. It is our understanding that the purpose for adopting NRS 533.087 and requiring proofs of vested rights was set to get all the unknown claims on the table within a time frame of December 31st, 2027. The current law says that if a claimant fails to file such a proof on or before December 31st, 2027, that claim will be deemed to be abandoned. Because of this bill, this doesn't apply to claims that the federal government thinks that they have. A private sector water right owner has to comply with the December 31st deadline, but the federal government doesn't have to do anything to file on the claims that they claim. Meanwhile, we have argued that since the state of Nevada can't appeal or hold the federal agencies to account for a December 31st, 2027 deadline, Nevada should protect its own citizens and move the deadline to a later date, giving the same consideration that is being given to the federal agencies. In the meantime, some type of solution, including a statewide declaration of adjudication, should be issued to bring all vested water right claims to the table. In a state which is so dominated by federal agencies exerting their authorities, we think that there should be more of a level playing field with consideration given to the private sector. SB 31 runs counter to this fairness. We oppose and urge you to oppose SB 31.
Thank you. And when you finish, if you'd like to vacate the seats that way in case there's others that would like to do so. Thank you. And finally, it looks like we've got our Senate Hall of Famer whenever you are ready.
It lit up green now. Thank you. Pete Goikachia for the record, representing myself. But I guess I have to back up just a little bit. I was one of the proponents of SB 270 when it was brought forward and passed in the 2017 session. Clearly, there are a lot of questions being asked today that weren't asked then. But I think there is some confusion about the federal sovereignty. All right, there's a difference between reserve water rights and vested water rights. And I think we heard in the state engineer's testimony that even the federal agencies in Ruby established vested claims by establishing a chain of title. We all do that. I've got my chain of title. Some of them go clear back to the 1850s. Because again, it's a vested use. There is a difference between reserve water rights and vested use. And I think we're gonna have to clarify that. Clearly, I think, when, then State Engineer Jason King and I worked on this bill, 8 years ago, I anticipated we were gonna probably have to punt the deadline. The effort was to get as much in place as we could before adjudication. Now, what have we adjudicated in the last 8 years? One, maybe? So, again, and you want to talk about litigation, just go ahead and order up adjudication of, pick your basin. You will find litigation, and you will litigate with the federal government. So I am concerned about granting the exemption to the federal agencies because of a threat, a letter that was written in 22, and we're hearing some comments, yeah, we're gonna get sued. Folks, you're gonna get sued when you adjudicate these basins. It's gonna happen. So the best we can do is establish the groundwork, make sure, and I agree, maybe we need to get back and clarify. All right, what are public water reserves, and what are those reserved rights that are reserved clearly by the federal government, whether it be on reservation, tribal lands, or whatever, and what truly is a vested claim? And that vested claim was established because some guy brought a wagon out there, established it, he had a milk cow and 3 kids, and put that water to beneficial use. Now that becomes a vested claim, and typically that will come forward in a chain of title, which the federal agencies use as well. And again, we're talking vested claims that are ahead of most of these agencies. And so that is problematic, but I agree, they have Federal Reserve rights, as the captain, sergeant, whatever he was now. The pilot said, clearly, yeah, they have, but I think we need to separate them. The best thing you can do, again, I think is punt it, delete the language, nobody should be exempt. The effort is to bring this data forward and try and establish this is what we've got on the books. And folks, we got way more on the books than we've got in the tank. With that, I'll close. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the
Thank
committee.
you. It's always good seeing you, sir. Thank you. Anybody else here in Carson? Seeing none, unless somebody had a question for the senator. Okay. Thank you. AVH, is there anybody online?
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 31, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Can you hear me?
You may begin when you are ready.
All right. Thank you, Chair. This is Jake Tibbetts. So, Chair Anderson, members of the Natural Resource Committee, this is Jake Tibbetts. I'm the Natural Resource Manager for Eureka County, speaking on behalf of Eureka County. And we do understand the reasoning why SB 31 was brought forward, including the Oregon case. However, we have concerns with SB 31 as currently proposed. We believe the circumstances behind the bill, it does provide inequity to non-federal vested water rights claimants, and it really undermines the purposes of why the deadline was put in place in 2017. It is puzzling to us why federal agencies would push back against the deadline when the deadline is intended to help properly manage water resources by knowing who is claiming what water rights in order to protect these rights. And federal agencies already have official policies in place requiring them to get all their water rights claims, vested or reserved, documented and on the books. This includes a BLM agreement with the state engineer's office. We suggest working through the interim on the issues identified today and bringing back something next session that is more consensus-based and still well before the 2027 deadline. However, if the committee chooses to move forward with SB 31, we have proposed an amendment that's on Nellis that we believe is necessary to address the following specific issues. SB 31 creates ambiguity regarding how federal water rights claims would be required to be followed should a specific adjudication be initiated between now and the 2027 deadline. Further, it is unclear how or if non-federal vested right claimants could amend their claim or bring forward other supporting information after the 2027 deadline. We are aware of some vested claimants being advised by the Division of Water Resources staff that exhaustive historical research is not necessary to get their claims on file before the deadline based on the best information they currently have, and that they should get their claims in, and that these claims can be bolstered or amended when water-specific or basin-specific adjudications are started. If that is the guidance being provided to some claimants, then the statute should be clear on that measure. So thank you for considering our perspective and request.
Thank you. Next caller.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. This is Martin Paris, P-A-R-I-S. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Cattlemen's Association. Our association's stance on SB 31 has been covered pretty well by the opposition testimony that you've all heard so far. So I just kind of want to do a ditto to what has been already said. And we would also ask the committee to kind of table this for now or consider extending the deadline so we can kind of maybe figure out a better game plan as we move forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Chair, there are no additional callers for opposition testimony.
Thank you so much. We'll now move to neutral. Is there anybody here in Carson?
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Paul Taggart. I'm a water rights attorney, have been for 30 years, and I'm here on behalf of myself. I think cleaning up the adjudication statutes is critical, and I think getting these old water rights figured out once and for all is really important for the state. I don't think it's right to fix the problem only for the federal government. I think we got to fix the problem for the Nevadans, and I think the deadline is unconstitutional. And I think it was made clear by Justice McCarran when he was on our state Supreme Court before he became Senator McCarran and passed the McCarran Amendment. He wrote a decision that reviewed the water law in 1913, and it said that we cannot impair vested rights by statute. So I think during an interim study, we should clean up the entire adjudication process. I initially thought we should get rid of the deadline altogether or extend the deadline. I'm here as neutral because I think getting things cleaned up is the goal. That should be the overall goal. We could fix the problem with the feds here now, but also we need to fix comprehensively, why aren't these things being done? When is it going to get done? At some point, it's going to be too late. All the witnesses, primary direct witnesses are gone. We just have documents now to go through and review. So we have to have an effort done, I think, during an interim study. We could ask the state engineer, can we initiate a statewide adjudication? That would solve the federal immunity problem. They would be called just like everybody else to do an adjudication. But why ask people, Nevadans, to submit claims when we have no idea when those claims might actually get adjudicated? There may need to be significant funding for the state engineer's office to do the adjudications that need to be done, and all of that could be done through an interim study. I've had conversations with the state engineer's office with many other people about that. We can put together some language about an interim study and what it would include. But I do think getting the federal exemption issue addressed now is a good step in the right direction. But we could use this time to direct the state engineer to do more review and an interim study to do more review of how we can fix. Why is it taking so long to do adjudications? Are there things we can do to make them easier to get done? Are there processes that can be changed in existing statute that can allow us to streamline through a statewide adjudication and get this done once and for all? So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Feels a little bit more like opposition, but we'll keep it in neutral light. It's a little bit closer to opposition, Mr. Taggart. Is there anyone else here in Carson who would like to testify in opposition? I'm sorry, neutral. Fault. Seeing none, Las Vegas, Elko, AVH. Is there anybody in neutral for this bill?
Chair, we have no callers for neutral.
Thank you so much. During the testimony, I would ask for the state engineer to possibly come back. I know that you're not a big fan of making sure to do a end remarks, but I believe there's a question both from the vice chair and possibly from me unless it is asked. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question. There was an amendment that was mentioned in the testimony, and I just wondered if that is a friendly accepted amendment or not.
Adam Sullivan, for the record, we've seen that amendment and we've talked to the individuals that brought forward, and we've talked about different advantages and disadvantages. In general, it's pretty consistent with what we're trying to accomplish, but we're also trying to be careful about not creating unintended consequences.
So at this time is not accepted from the department, is what I'm hearing you say.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And then my other question, actually, Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to follow up on my colleague's question there and probe a little bit more on that amendment. Are there portions of that amendment that would be acceptable versus portions that would be unacceptable?
James Blotton for the record. I do think it's going to require some more work. I think just about every part of the amendment, there's something we like and something that we're worried about. So it would require some more work to be able to accept those amendments from the division's perspective.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. So my last question also has to do with possibly the neutral slash opposition. Has there been discussion about changing the date? Would that satisfy the issues that are being brought forward in this bill, or would that cause more problems if we were to push the date to a different time frame?
Adam Sullivan for the record. From my perspective, the date is really important to get this as much information submitted as we possibly can. When we have unknowns out there, it slows down other aspects of our work, and really from a workflow standpoint, it's important to keep that deadline.
And to follow up on what the state engineer said, James Blotton for the record, if the deadline is pushed, that further deadline down the road still could not be applied to the federal government from what I can tell from the legal precedent.
Thank you for that clarification, and I'm sure we will continue to have more discussions. But thank you very much. I'm sure that there's some more offline questions that might be happening, but thank you. I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 31 and move into our last item for the day, and that is public comment. Actually, before going into public comment, I do want to make a very quick comment. We continually ask AVH if there's anybody else on the line, and yet we rarely thank the people that work for AVH. So I just wanted to thank them for all the work that they do to help us look good. So with that stated, is there anybody on the line for public comment? AVH, you're up first this time.
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but we have no callers for public comment at this time.
Thank you. Is there anybody here in Carson who would like to make public comment? Seeing nobody coming up to the mic and nobody in Vegas or in Elko, I will close today's committee meeting, and let's just say go Assembly in today's softball game. Thank you.